It started under a low, smothering ceiling of cloud, one of those iron-grey overcasts that make the world feel smaller, sound carry farther, and nerves fray quicker. Out of that gloom, Russia rolled the dice on its largest mechanized assault in a long while. Within minutes, a wall of Ukrainian drones met the advance like a buzzsaw. By the time the onslaught sputtered out, Ukrainian accounts tallied at least 100 Russian soldiers killed, about 20 armoured vehicles ruined, and roughly 40 motorcycles scattered in blackened heaps across the fields. The footage is brutal, the accounts are detailed, and together they tell a story of modern war where speed belongs to the drone, not the tank. The ground this happened on matters. The sector is in eastern Ukraine, north of a town the transcript renders as Akros, a problem child stretch of front that's hosted some of the heaviest fighting for a year and change. Russian forces have been clawing for control of villages rendered here as Shakov, with particularly vicious action around a crossroads the source script refers to near Vladimirovka/Volorivka/Volgarivka. The transliterations are messy, but the pattern is clear. A northern pocket where push and pull never stop, and where Moscow has kept the offensive pressure on. It's the kind of broken, pitted battle space where map colors blur, tan for Ukraine, red for Russia, grey for contested, until the only honest shade is smoke. When the assault kicked off, the first things out of the haze weren't tanks. They were motorcycles, lots of them, ripping in from multiple approach lanes. This wasn't a ragtag biker gang. It was a tactical opening act, a cheap, fast first echelon intended to find seams and sow confusion. Behind them came the heavy metal, armoured personnel carriers, tanks, including several of the now familiar turtle conversions with slabbed-on roofs, and more APCs threading the approach roads. Ukrainian Azov elements described about 35 heavy vehicles in the assault package, plus the Moto Swarm. The bad weather looked like part of Russia's plan. Overcast can ground drones or at least complicate their work. But on this day, it didn't save the attackers. One by one, the bikes went down to Ukrainian quadcopters and FPVs, and the armour began to brew up under a hammering of top-down hits. Some of the armour did make it forward far enough to disgorge infantry. Azov counted around 32 Russian soldiers landing in the built-up area the transcript calls Volorivka. Those troops sprinted off the road, dove for basements, and tried to let darkness do the rest. Night didn't help. Drone teams hunted house to house, pouring through streets, courtyards and roof lines, turning safe rooms into traps. It reads like 1916 met 2025. Trenches and basements, but with buzzing eyes and explosive stings overhead, and nowhere truly safe once operators have a grid and a signal. Azov's own roll-up of the fight is stark. They listed 1 armoured tractor, 3 tanks, and 16 armoured personnel carriers destroyed, 41 motorcycles eliminated, and 107 Russian soldiers killed, with another 51 wounded. By the morning of October 10th, their observers reported no enemy infantry movement inside the village. In their words, the assault failed. Numbers in war are always arguments, but the evidence trail, the scorched hulks, the shredded bikes, the thermal signatures going cold, backs the gist. The push hit prepared defenses under drone-dominated skies and broke. More than one Ukrainian formation had hands on this fight. Analysts tracking the deep state map streams noted that the 93rd Brigade's area of responsibility overlapped the action, and the battle damage montage that followed showed their fighters passing burned-out Russian vehicles on the road to contact. In all, the defense and counterstrikes were described as a joint effort. 93rd Brigade elements, the 156th Mechanized, Azov's Omega Wings, the 109th, Lasers Group, and Phoenix. Small names that recur across this war's unofficial record, quietly fixing big problems in muddy places. The Russian plan? Exploit the low ceiling and poor visibility to slip past Ukraine's eyes in the sky. The outcome? A wall of explosives, smart mines, artillery traps, and drones that turned that weather bet into a costly bust. Even at a smaller nearby axis, the pattern repeated. As Ukrainians tell it, a separate thrust put 8 Russian vehicles onto the road, and they immediately started getting hit. 1 was destroyed, 2 were damaged, and the rest withdrew before the road could claim more metal. It's a glimpse of the learning curve on both sides. Russian armor testing, probing, accelerating, then slamming the brakes as drones appear and the first plume of black smoke marks the lesson of the day. If the Ukrainian accounts are granular, the Russian side provides a revealing counterpoint. A prominent mill blogger known as Archangel of Special Forces described the same sector. He calls it the Dopilia direction as the most intense on the front, with sabotage groups sparring in the seams and an assault with armored vehicles preliminarily securing the outskirts of Vladimirovka. He also claimed Ukraine is using F-16 as close air support and even dropping a guided bomb in the area. That's significant if true, but the Ukrainian side didn't tie F-16 strikes to this specific engagement, and there's no matching video from the fight. The fog of war exists on Telegram too. Even Archangel, though, undercuts any rosy picture by noting ambushes from the 225th Separate Assault Battalion and acknowledging how fragile that contact line feels when small, lethal groups roam behind the wire. So what actually happened out there beneath the cloud deck? Start with the doctrine. Russia stacked a composite package. First echelon motorcycles, second echelon armor and mechanized infantry, then drove at a seam. Ukraine met it with what this war has made painfully routine. Layered, pre-registered defenses with mine-explosive barriers, crosstalk between artillery and drone operators, and a hunter-killer rhythm that punishes any unit that lingers in a kill sack. When the bikes fell, the armor tried to push. But every time a turtle roof or troop carrier crested into a clear field of view, a dozen operators found angles, and angles found metal. Even units that successfully dumped infantry soon discovered that on the objective means less and less if the air above your street belongs to the other side. Now, a hard truth for both sides. Armor isn't obsolete. Not yet. Azov's own math suggests the assault used roughly 35 armored vehicles, and their destruction tally for APCs and tanks is a little over half that. That means a meaningful fraction survived contact, absorbed punishment, and withdrew to fight another day. Motorcycles and pickups? Not so lucky. A bike with a grenade taped under its seat is still a bike when shrapnel starts flying. A T-72 with a cracked glacis can limp. A Yamaha with a cracked engine block is just a conversation piece. The cost curve still matters. Russia can afford to waste motorcycles. It cannot afford to waste armor forever. The deeper point is about the shape of this front. Unlike other sectors where colours sit in tidy bands, the area north of Akros looks like a shattered windshield. Thin wedges, little bubbles, pockets of presence that don't mature into control. Archangel's complaint about fragility maps onto what Ukrainian units describe. Infiltration through gaps, a quick plant of a flag, and then a failure to consolidate before counter-hunters arrive. The result is a dangerous place to be a platoon leader. Encircle and squeeze drills at micro scale, where the wrong hedgerow at the wrong hour becomes a cul-de-sac of last stands. It's why Ukraine has been shuffling hunters to this sector, tasking them to clean up and crush the groups that slip through to cause chaos. You don't have to hold ground to be a problem. You just have to get behind someone and make them look over their shoulder. From a distance, the assault reads like déjà vu, another massed push that runs headfirst into the drone age. But there's something more here. The Russians tried to game the weather and tempo. They moved with unusual composure at first contact. They brought different vehicle types to the party, including the turtle conversions meant to shrug off small drones. And yet, even with those adaptations, the outcome was largely the same. Smoke columns, dismounts pinned in alleys, and drone operators counting coup. You can change the vehicle's roofline, but you can't change the geometry of being seen from above. A brief aside, because even in the middle of a meat grinder, politics lurks at the edges of the frame. While these fights burn themselves into the soil, a national poll in the US was painting a picture that doesn't match the loudest comment sections. A large Harvard Capps-Harris sample from October 1st to 2nd, 2025 indicated broad American support for sanctioning Russia, 77% overall and 86% among Republicans, and strong backing for continuing to supply Ukraine with weapons if Moscow refuses to negotiate, with 68% in favor, and the GOP showing the highest support at 73%. One poll is just one poll, but it underlines a reality. When the question is framed around helping Ukraine fight for its own defense, as opposed to deploying US troops, support solidifies. That matters because ammunition and air defenses don't materialize out of thin air. They arrive because politics lets logistics do its job. Back to the street fight. The Russian blogosphere's hint about F-16s deserves the usual caution tape. Ukraine has been integrating Western aircraft and munitions, and we are seeing more glide bomb-style effects pop up in the open source record. But for this specific engagement, the one with the motorcycles and 30-plus armored vehicles, the Ukrainian narrative doesn't credit jets for the kill list, and there's no matching cockpit tape or crater analysis in the footage packet. If a Viper did drop in, it did so in the background of a battle that was, for all practical purposes, decided by the same pairing we've seen again and again. Drones to find and fix, and fires to finish.
There's another tactical breadcrumb in the accounts: timing and echeloning. Russian mobile groups rode first, then armor rolled, then dismounts tried to pocket themselves in basements to wait for night. That wait for night instinct used to work. Night was when the wire cutters came out, or the sappers did their quiet work. In 2025, night belongs to whomever owns the batteries and the thermal sensors. The Ukrainian drone teams didn't go home at dusk. They clipped on fresh packs, dialed up the IR, and turned the village into a chessboard. It wasn't the cover of darkness. It was the cover of 1,000 tiny suns glowing through walls and doors on a handheld screen. Let's talk survivability. Armor commanders reading this will point out correctly that tanks and APCs can eat punishment that would annihilate a technical. That's one reason some vehicles survived to reverse out. But survivability isn't just plate thickness. It's the ability to disappear when you need to. A tank in open country during a drone surge is a bad magician. Big hat, no rabbits. Even the cleverest turtle shelling can't make you vanish when a buzzing camera is loitering at treetop height, beaming your outline to a dozen waiting FPVs. A bit of gallows humor is floating around the front lines about those turtle tanks. They look like a teenage mutant ninja turtle, sure. Unfortunately, they fight like a turtle too. Slow, shelled, and very, very stressed. Ukraine's defenders stitched this kill zone together ahead of time. Mines to shape avenues of approach, observers to feed target grids, artillery teams on hair trigger, and drone operators comfortable with handing off targets like a relay race. When the Russians tried wave after wave, the defenders never had to chase. They let the waves break on their timeline, then surfed the foam back toward the runner-ups. That coordination is the quiet hero of the day. Not a single silver bullet weapon, but a network that turns every ditch and hedgerow into part of a single firing solution. Strategically, what does this mean? First, Russia is still testing mass, even after 2 bruising years of learning what mass attracts in a sky full of quadcopters. The presence of 30-plus armored vehicles is a real commitment of metal. It signals a willingness to gamble that tempo, weather, and confusion can beat silicon and C4. Second, Ukraine's defense remains deeply elastic in the seams. The fragility Archangel laments cuts both ways. Russia can make a mess in gaps, but Ukraine can almost always turn that mess into a kill box once enemy units settle and reveal their lanes. The space north of Akros looks chaotic on a map, but chaos favors the side with faster eyes and steadier hands. Now, the uncomfortable nuance. Some Russian armor got out. Some dismounts survived initial contact. If you're planning tomorrow's fight, you don't plan for a rout. You plan for a wounded wolf that still has teeth. That means Ukraine will keep burning through drone stocks and artillery barrels to maintain this kind of performance. It also means Russia will keep experimenting, because that's how militaries work. You get punched in the mouth, then you try a different head movement. The next assault may come with more smoke, more EW, a denser first echelon, or a narrower spear point. Weather is free, creativity is cheap. Both sides will continue to spend lavishly. We should also pause on the human detail tucked in the logs. 32 infantry stepping off armored decks, sprinting into cellars, and waiting for the night that never saved them. There's a grim rhyme to this war. Steel is a headline, but men are the story. The drone that threads a stairwell is not a technological marvel to the man at the bottom of the stairs. It's a last sound. That is the horror lurking behind the sterile language of prepared defenses and chaotic deployment. You can't talk about modern assaults without admitting that this kind of micro-scale hunting will define them. Back in Washington, the political temperature matters because the industrial thermostat follows it. The same poll that showed broad sanction support also stressed a hard boundary: support craters when the question becomes US troops on the ground. Americans favor helping Ukraine fight. They do not favor fighting Ukraine's war for it. That line has constrained strategy from day one, and it will continue to shape which tools show up at the front and which stay in the brochures. If Kyiv keeps getting the consumables it needs, fights like this one can keep ending the way this one did. If not, the equation changes fast, and not in Kyiv's favor. As for the Russian blog claim about guided bombs and F-16s, the cautious verdict stands. Possible, not proven, and certainly not decisive in this specific clash. Whatever toppled those motorcycles and split those APCs wasn't a flyby at Mach 1. It was 1,000 decisions by a lattice of small teams, practiced at turning contact into conclusions. And the mill blogger's other point, the fragility of the lines, ironically corroborates what Ukrainian units claimed. Even when the Russians elbow through, they can't hold long enough to turn a lodgment into a line. When the pocket appears, it's already collapsing. There's a tactical epilogue worth stating plainly. Russia's motorcycle-first concept is not absurd on its face. Bikes are cheap, fast, and replaceable. They can scout, screen, and create dust and noise. But they are also two-wheeled invitations to a drone strike. Hot engines, soft riders, zero armor. In a battle space where hovering cameras assign homework to explosives, a motorcycle is a signature of vulnerability. The trick worked, just often enough to try again. This time, it got graded by a swarm. So here's the ledger for the day beneath the overcast. Russia pushed a multi-echelon package, motorcycles first, armor behind, into a Ukrainian sector that had been wired, mined, mapped, and watched. Ukrainian units from several formations, including the 93rd Brigade and named Azov elements, executed a defense that blended mines, artillery, and drones into one skin. By Azov's account, the loss tally ran to triple-digit dead, dozens of ruined bikes, and a brace of smashed armor. By morning, Ukrainian eyes reported no Russian infantry moving inside the village. On the Russian side, even supportive voices described the line as fragile, the action as continuous, and the ambushes as persistent. What does it add up to in the larger story? It's another chapter in a war that keeps rewriting the rules of mechanized assault. Tanks still matter, courage still matters, but initiative now bubbles up from cheap electronics and agile teams. Weather is a tactic, not a shelter. Night belongs to batteries. And the unit that can see first, share fastest, and strike from the air with the fewest seconds between spotting and blast will dictate the narrative on any given day. In this engagement, that unit was Ukrainian. In the next, it will be whichever side kept its operators rested, its drones charged, and its targeting picture clean. For Ukraine, there's a strategic comfort and a strategic warning in this outcome. Comfort because layered defenses, smart munitions, and coordinated drone artillery teams can strip momentum from even a large mechanized push. Warning because the defenders must constantly replenish this machine. FPV kits, optics, replacement tubes, spare parts, and training cycles. For Russia, the lesson is just as double-edged. Mass remains a lever, but in the drone age, mass without surprise is just a bigger target. In the end, the sky closed back in, the smoke thinned, and the fields north of Akros looked like they did the day before. Scored, angry, undecided. But war isn't a still frame, it's a rhythm. The rhythm of this fight was set by rotors, not treads, and that's why the assault failed. The question for tomorrow is simple and terrifying. In a battle space where the smallest camera can decide the fate of the largest machine, who will run out first, targets or batteries? If there's a final note to leave you with, it's this: doctrine follows reality. Russia tried a classic 3-act play: probe, punch, pour through, and reality rewrote the ending. Ukraine trusted its network and let the assault come to it. For the soldiers on both sides, the result wasn't theory. It was the longest walk of their lives, under a sky that seemed to listen, watch, and whisper coordinates. The next offensive will come. Another grey morning will arrive. And somewhere on a tree line,
a drone operator will lift a controller, call out a grid, and prove again that in this war, the decisive high ground is often the height of a man's shoulders and the reach of his antenna.
Because that's the truth of the unfolding story in this sector. The tanks came, the drones saw, the defense conquered. The names of the villages may blur and the maps may flicker between colors, but the pattern, motorbikes flashing forward, armor grinding into view, operators turning movement into targets, is now carved into the dirt. For the Russians, the lesson stings. For the Ukrainians, the lesson sustains. And for everyone watching, the question remains: how long can 20th century steel pretend to be safe under a 21st century swarm? One last thought before we leave the field. In the poll numbers back in the US, there's a reminder that wars are not won only at the front. They're sustained or starved by votes, budgets, and public will. If the support that keeps Ukrainian operators in the air stays intact, days like this will keep ending the way this one did. If that support falters, surprise will start to favor the side that can afford to waste men to save metal. For now, the defenders in this story had what they needed when they needed it. They had the weather, the wires, the mines, and above all, the buzzing patience to turn a major armoured assault into another cautionary tale. And that's how, under a bruised October sky, a Russian armoured thrust met the new law of this battlefield. He who owns the overhead owns the hour. The motorcycles roared, the armour followed. The drones wrote the ending, the smoke spelled it out.